What is going on, everybody? Owen Fortner with the Cover Time Podcast back here again today, going over a special video, going over something that I've been wanting to do for a little bit now. Cover the 2024 Houston Texans, previews, what I do like, what I don't like, a couple statistics from the prior year, a couple numbers that I think are going to be relevant for this year as well that we saw them produce in 2023, a couple of the players that are standouts, a couple of breakout players potentially, go over their additions, go over some of the people they lost, their schedule, some of the prop bets they like. It's gonna be a packed episode if you want to learn about the Houston Texans. Before I start there, though, football is back. It is back. I'm banging on the table for it. I mean, at this point, we are mere days away from Thursday night football, Chiefs Ravens, AFC Championship rematch. Then Friday, we get football too. We get that Brazil game between the Eagles and the Packers. Saturday, college is back. Big games like Michigan, Texas are playing. And then Sunday, we get a full slate of games, including your Houston Texans playing the Colts in week 1. We get Sunday night football, which I believe is Lions, Rams. Probably get 2 Monday night games. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be exciting. So keep tuning in. I'll make a couple, I'll make at least one more pod this week going into a full 2024 preview, my playoff predictions, my Super Bowl predictions. So stay tuned for that. Let's get into your Houston Texans. Couple prior year, just win-loss, basic 30,000 feet statistics. Your Texans were 10-7 last year. They finished 6-2 against teams with a winning record, 4-2 in the division. This was a team coming in that had the second overall pick and then traded up for the third overall pick as well. Got C.J. Stroud, Will Anderson. Bottom of the barrel, fourth place schedule. Played the NFC South and the AFC North last year with their two divisional scheduling bits. So the NFC South was kind of an easy break. Played one of the lower strength of schedules, but beat a lot of teams with winning records. I mean, that includes teams like the Saints, the Bengals. Bengals might have actually been in there. Jaguars, Colts, Buccaneers. So some good teams in there, but then lost some bad games too. Lost to Carolina, lost to Atlanta, beat Tennessee twice, even one of them without C.J. Stroud. So anyway, so they went on to the playoffs. They won that final win and get in game against the Colts in Week 18, the team that I despise the most. That was my biggest rivals in NFL fantasy, the Indianapolis Colts. God, even just like saying them. But Gardner Minshew misses a pass to walk into the end zone for the Colts to essentially win that game. Pass a little low, catches dropped. Who that's particularly on, I'll let you guys leave it to your discretion. But the Texans win that game nonetheless on the road. They then go and play a divisional round game against the Browns, and they dominate 45-14. Joe Flacco had his head spinning, didn't know what was going on. The Texans, who traded Deshaun Watson to the Browns, get revenge on the Browns. They had the Browns' first-round pick, so by beating them in the playoffs, they actually got a better draft selection in the first round, which they ended up trading away anyway, but they had a better draft position than the Browns because they had their pick. They then played the Ravens in the divisional round, a game in which in the first half they played competitively, I guess. The interior of their offensive line was getting dominated by Madubuike and Jadeveon Clowney. It was getting ripped apart, even by their middle linebackers, by Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen. They were ripping the Texans' interior off the line apart. And the defense did a good job of holding Lamar Jackson. But Kyrie Fairbairn missed an important field goal. Lamar turns up in the second half. The Texans lose that game 34-10. Get all the way to the divisional round. Ravens go on to lose to the Chiefs. Chiefs win the Super Bowl, yada, yada. So overall, very successful season for the Texans based on the trajectory of where they were 24 months ago. I mean, this is one of the best turnarounds that I've seen from a team going first to worst. I mean, there are people out there taking the Texans to win the Super Bowl. It's like a trendy pick. I've never seen that in my life. Not since like 2012. We went 11-5. People are picking the team to, Matt Schaub tears his ACL. TJ Yates comes in, they win a playoff game, they lose to the Ravens in the divisional round. How fitting. It's all I've known in my life is losing to the Ravens or the Patriots in the divisional round. And the Texans are like a sneaky Super Bowl pick, but they weren't trendy. They're super trendy this year. Everybody and their mother's picking the Texans to make it to the Super Bowl. It's like there's only been like 6 teams in the last 20 years that have made the Super Bowl of the AFC. And the Texans are the thing they're Texans are going to be the 7th team. I don't know, but I appreciate it. It makes me more excited. So the Texans offense last year, 13th in total scoring, 12th in passing yards, 22nd in rushing yards. Actually, a little bit better than I thought it would be. First in turnovers giving up, as in they had the least amount of turnovers given up. Put a pin in that. I want to come back to that a little bit later on why that could actually be somewhat of a problem. And then 16th in red zone scoring percentage, which is better than I thought it would be, considering I watched this team game after game get into the red zone. You know, they were great between the 20s. I mean, they were a deep, high-flying passing team. Noah Brown, Nico Collins, Tank Dell for part of the season, getting big gains over the middle. Dalton Schultz coming up the seam, which led to C.J. Stroud in just 12 games having nearly 4,000 yards. But they couldn't score in the red zone. They couldn't run the ball, couldn't get any push inside the 10. But 16th, not as bad as I thought it would be. Defensive ranks, 11th in scoring, 6th in opponent third down conversion. That's really good. 15th in yards per game, 30th in completion percentage allowed. Horrible. And I knew this was coming. I knew it was coming. I remember watching Texans Jaguars, 1 o'clock around week 8 or week 9. And there was a point in that game where the Jaguars just decided, we are going to line up an empty and just let Trevor Lawrence go to work. And I almost shit a brick. I mean, that is the way to go against this Texans team last year. Their secondary was Derek Stingley, who was really good late in the year. He was hurt the first half of the year, but he's coming alive. You don't throw his way, but you can throw guys like Steven Nelson, Eric Murray, Jalen Petrie, even over the middle over Blake Cashman and Christian Harris. You could throw over these guys. So 30th isn't great. 9th in sacks, which if you remember early in the year, this was a team with a ton of QB pressures early in the year, could not get to the quarterback. That's a little stereotypical of a D'Amico Ryan's defense. They are much more a disciplined defensive pass rush. Although Jonathan Grenard got 12.5 sacks last year, I think it's a little bit of Fugazi. I'll get into that when I talk about Jonathan Grenard being off the Texans later. And then the Texans were 16th in takeaways. So middle of the pack in a lot of these defensive scoring, a lot of these defensive stats, except for the completion percentage, which is terrible. They also were 31st in penalties per game. They averaged 7 penalties per game. Huge problem for this team. I think this will get better this year. I think another year under D'Amico Ryans, another year of leadership with C.J. Stroud, with Will Anderson on the back end, adding some guys who are leaders with Daniil Hunter, Azeez Al-Shaair, Danico Autry. I think this will get better. I hope it does. It needs to. You cannot average 7 penalties per game and win big in the NFL. You just can't do it. They had the 5th easiest strength of schedule last year. They went 10-9 against the spread, including their playoff games, so about 500. And they only had 1 regular season primetime game last year, and it wasn't even scheduled. It was a flex Week 18 game against the Colts Saturday night, so they were not scheduled a single primetime game. Texans fans were wearing that as like a badge of honor. It's a pride thing. I get it. I agree with it. The NFL, I do not blame them for not putting the Texans in primetime. The Texans were supposed to be a dumpster fire last year. Let's get into a couple players last year, a couple standouts, a couple of the guys that you guys know. Not going to get too deep in the weeds here. Defense, maybe a little deeper, but 3 guys on offense who are coming back who were standouts last year. Let's start it with the man, C.J. Stroud. 64% completion percentage, 45-57, so 4,500 passing yards, 29 total touchdowns, 3 on the ground. 5 interceptions. Now, this 5 is concentrated into 3 games. I remember them very well. He threw his first interception against the Saints. Basically, just didn't see the linebacker over the middle, threw it to him. Nico Collins actually punched the ball out. Texans recovered, keep that drive alive. They go on to score on that drive, so not a bad first interception to throw. He then throws one late against the Bengals, which keeps the Bengals in that game on a drag route to Tank Dell. Terrible interception. And then he threw 3 interceptions against Arizona, a game in which he throws 2 awesome touchdown passes, one to Dalton Schultz, the other to Tank Dell, which is like a highlight. That Tank Dell highlight is a highlight. Tank Dell touchdown highlight of his year. But then throws 3 interceptions after that to Arizona. So concentrating to 3 games, this number will increase. He will throw more interceptions this year. It's inevitable. And a 101.7 QBR. I don't know where this ranks as far as other quarterbacks, but I wanted to include it. A rookie with over 100 QBR. I mean, Dak Prescott may have had that. Russell Wilson may have had that, but I don't know many rookies who accomplish that. 2 receivers to go over, Nico Collins and Tank Dell. Let's start with Nico Collins. 17 games for Nico Collins. 91 receptions on 126 targets. This guy is wide receiver 1. Stephon Diggs comes in. I don't care. This is wide receiver 1. This is the man. This is the guy who you paid long term. He's your guy. Including the playoffs, 1,461 receiving yards, 9 total touchdowns, 16.1 yards per catch. Excuse me. Tank Dell, 11 games. Gets hurt against the Cardinals. Tries to block in on a run play on the red zone and breaks his leg, either his tibia or his fibia, one of those. He played in the preseason against the Steelers, scored a nice touchdown. That was good to see. That was helpful. He also got shot, weirdly enough, in Sanford, a place where I've actually been to a lot of bars in Sanford. So yeah, I might have to stop doing that, although nobody's gunning for me, I don't think. But Tank Dell in 11 games, 47 receptions on 75 targets, 709 receiving yards, 7 touchdowns, 15.1 yards per catch. His over-under for receiving touchdowns is 4.5. He had 7 in 11 games last year. That might be my favorite bet for the prop bets, but we'll get into that later. I don't want to get ahead of myself. Off-season losses. Some big ones for us. So Devin Singletary, our top rusher last year, played in 19 games for us, including the playoffs, goes to the Giants. 238 rushing attempts, a career high for him. 1,231 total yards, 5 total touchdowns, really low, and 4.1 yards per attempt, really low. His career low, personally. Now we get Joe Mixon in here, which we'll go over in a bit, but you know, it was Dameon Pierce to start the year, and it took about 4 or 5 weeks to finally get Devin Singletary going, and he was the bell cow back after that. We didn't see much of Dameon Pierce. Blake Cashman goes to Minnesota, middle linebacker, 118 total tackles for us last year, 12 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, 1 interception. Another Texan that heads to Minnesota is Jonathan Grenard, our sack leader last year. Only guy in a long time that I can remember with 10-plus sacks. He finishes with 12.5, 57 total tackles, 16 tackles for loss. All were career highs. I have heard some rumors, and I find this to be true because I know what a D'Amico Ryan-style defense looks like. That Jonathan Grenard is sack hunting a bit last year. He's not playing his gap. He's getting upfield. I would buy it. You know, as somebody for him who is coming into a contract year, sacks are a huge part of a defensive end getting big money. You know, they pop out of that big stat, sacks and tackles for loss. They're a bit fickle. Like sacks can come and go, but good gap play and tackles for loss tend to translate. 16 TFLs was awesome. So, you know, I wish him the best in Minnesota, but they're paying him huge money. We basically swap defensive ends with them and get Danielle Hunter. So we'll see who wins that one. Steven Nelson, our cornerback 2 last year, actually retired, played all 19 games, including the playoffs, 75 total tackles, 5 interceptions, 15 pass deflections. The guy who takes over this role this year is Kamari Lassiter, rookie out of Georgia. We'll come back to him. A couple players that were cut. Noah Brown, wide receiver. Robert Woods, wide receiver, body trees. See you, buddy. Andrew Beck, fullback, caught a touchdown against the Colts in that playing game last year. CJ Henderson, who we signed in the offseason, former first-round cornerback. Mike Ford, former quarterback as well for the Browns, and then Desmond King, another quarterback who played well last year, but he fumbled a punt return in his final preseason game this year. I'm not saying that's the end all be all, but his special teams presence was going to be a big part, and he can't be fumbling. So he doesn't make the cut. Getting into our offseason additions. This might be the most exciting offseason I've ever had as a Houston Texans fan. Just thinking back on it, there's not a single other one where I was super, super intrigued or found myself thinking, wow, this team got so much better. But this year, they really took some big swings. I can really respect Nick Caserio and the boys taking huge swings. And it starts with Stephon Diggs. So Diggs comes from Buffalo via trade, 31 years old, played in all 19 games for the Bills last year, had 117 receptions, 1,256 yards, 10.7 yards per catch, second worst of his career, by the way. 8 touchdowns, comes in on a contract of 1 year, $22.5 million. It was a reworking from his previous contract. He's able to hit the open market next year. He's a bit of a, what do you call it? Like a mercenary-ish for us this year. Just like a 1 year, hire him on. Could he get an extension? If he's awesome, maybe. We'll see. I don't think that's going to be the case because they got 2 younger receivers that they really like. I want to travel back, though, to the 10.7 yards per catch. I actually don't think this is an issue at all, being that's the second worst of his career. The Texans are bringing this guy on to help in a part of their passing game that really struggled last year, which was the short and intermediate game. Deep passing, Noah Brown and Tank Dell were amazing at it. Short, 10 to 15 yard digs, hitches, outs, posts, corners. Nigel Collins could run that all, and he was the guy for that. But in the short game, running drags, running pick plays, running digs, like digs or zag routes, any of that, Stephon Diggs is going to be the guy for that. Tremendous route runner. If he averages 10 yards a catch this year again, I think that's perfect because I think that's what we're hiring on him for, is not to catch a 5-yard ball and turn it into a 25-yard gain, but to catch a 5-yard ball, make sure it's caught, and get us 8 yards on a play. I think that's what he's here for. Danielle Hunter, defensive end from Minnesota, 30 years old, comes in on a 2-year deal. He had 83 total tackles last year, 16 and a half sacks, not his career high, but really close. His career high is 17 or 17 and a half. 23 tackles for loss, 4 forced fumbles. That is his career high. His contract is 2 years, $49 million with 48 of it guaranteed. So he is in for the next 2 years. He's not going anywhere. Joe Mixon, running back from Cincinnati, 29 years old, played in 17 games for them last year. They didn't make the playoffs, so that was every game. 257 attempts, 1,400 total yards, 12 touchdowns, 4 yards per attempt. Not his career low, but kind of falls in the middle of the pack there. And the Texans gave him an extension after trading for him. He's on for 3 years, $25.5 million, 16 guaranteed. So essentially about a 2-year contract. Now, I like Joe Mixon a lot. I think he's an upgrade over Devin Singletary, though I don't think it's a huge upgrade. I think where it helps the most is in that red zone efficiency where we were 16th. This is a guy who, when you get into the 5, I trust him so much more to be a decisive runner at the point of attack than I do, especially Dameon Pierce, and more than Devin Singletary. So he had 12 touchdowns last year. Not all of those on the ground, but could he get 7, 8, 9 for us on the ground? I think that's where he's going to be most effective, is in the red zone, a place where we struggled last year. Azeez Al-Shaair, middle linebacker, coming in to replace Blake Cashman from Tennessee. 29 years old, played in all 17 games for the Titans last year. 163 total tackles, career high for him. 9 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. He comes on at 3 years, $34 million, 21.5 guaranteed. His running mate from Tennessee also comes Denico Autry. Denico Autry is 34, going to be 35 going into 2025. 17 games for him, 50 total tackles, 11.5 sacks, career high for him. 12 and a half tackles for loss and 2 forced fumbles. He is suspended for 2 games this year. Excuse me. He is suspended for 6 games. Got mixed up with the 2 forced fumbles. 6 games due to illegal substance issues. This could be a silver lining. A guy at his age, 34, is probably going to be more productive for the last 11 games than for the, if he played the first 11 and then come the last 6 for the end of the year, probably a bit more productive in this sense. Our schedule early in the year is easier on paper than our year-end schedule. So I do like that he's coming back. He's going to be healthy. I would say by week 8, he's probably in playing shape for sure. But he comes in at 2 years, $20 million, 10.5 guaranteed, essentially a 1-year contract. Other guys coming back or being signed include Derek Barnett, who was re-signed, Mario Edwards Jr. on the interior, re-signed. Jeff Okudah comes from Atlanta. Tommy Townsend, punter from Kansas City. People think Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid are the reason that the Chiefs win Super Bowls. It's Tommy Townsend. Their dynasty's over because he's here in Houston now. Fulorunso Fatukasi, defensive tackle coming from the Jaguars, who had been in, he was with the Jets prior in a D'Amico Ryan style defense, with what's his name? Who's the Jets head coach? Anyway, so comes from the Jags. Didn't have a great year last year, but we signed him on, and then Dalton Schultz gets re-signed too as our tight end. Texans top draft picks. I'm only going to go over one guy. We took 2 second-round picks, but one of them shouldn't see the field that much, Blake Fisher, unless there's an injury at tackle. Our top draft pick is going to play a lot of snaps, is second-round pick Kamari Lassiter out of Georgia, quarterback. Now, Kamari Lassiter last year allowed only 15 receptions on 39 targets, only 136 yards, and a passer rating of 14.7. That was top 10 in the nation at his position. He ran in the low 4.6s, as in like 4.61, 4.62 for this 40 at the combine. That allowed him to decrease in the draft at his stock, or else he probably would have been like a late first-round pick. I love this replacement for Steven Nelson. Steven Nelson had a great year for us last year as our quarterback too, but there wasn't a lot of upside. He had 5 interceptions, but the upside just isn't there because he's an older player. Here's Kamari Lassiter coming in. Second-round pick. We're not even paying him much. I love him as our quarterback too. I love his room for growth. Supposedly came into camp and won the job almost immediately. There was zero argument as to whether, it's Jeff Okudah, CJ Henderson, Mike Ford, are any of these guys, Miles Bryant, going to take over this role? No, it's Kamari Lassiter. He's a dog. So our coaches. So D'Amico Ryans returns as our head coach, obviously. His second year as being a head coach. Bobby Slowick returns with him, offensive coordinator. His second year as an offensive coordinator. Somebody who, if the Texans play well this year, will probably get a head coaching nod next year. And then our defensive coordinator is Matt Burke. It's his 4th year as a defensive coordinator in general, but he's been in the league since 2004. But make no mistake, this is D'Amico Ryan's defense. Take a sip of water. Take a break. All right, fellas. Let's get into the schedule a little bit. Now, I've got it on the screen here for you to see, just as an overall background. If you want to take a look, marvel in it. Like I said, I think early in the season, we have some easier games, if you will. Play the Bears with Caleb Williams on Sunday Night Football. Play the Sam Darnold-led Vikings. We play the Patriots. Bills we get at home. Jags we get at home. Here's my top 5 toughest games, in my opinion. So on 12/21, we play at the Chiefs. And then we play 4 days later versus Baltimore. Really tough. Really tough sledding there. We could easily go 0-2 in those games. On October 20th, we play at Green Bay. November 18th, prior to Thanksgiving, we play at Dallas Monday night. And then we play at the Jets on Halloween. So those are our 5 toughest games, in my opinion. If you'll notice, 2 of those come really late in the year, and the one that I kinda left out, which is an honorable mention, which could take over for that Dallas spot potentially, um, we play the Dolphins at home in week 15, but we play them at home. We gotta win that game because then we go to Kansas City. That's probably a loss. So, late in the year, we gotta win some of those games, but those are our top 5 toughest games in my opinion. Easiest games. Both games against Tennessee inherently. We beat them twice last year, one of them without even CJ Stroud. I know Tennessee's bulked up a little bit. They're kind of going for it, but they're not ready yet, I don't think. But we play them at home and on the road, obviously, being a divisional opponent. We play in New England in October. In October, we also play at home against Indianapolis. And then our other two easiest games, probably, Minnesota, and then either Chicago or Jacksonville, kind of a toss up there. Uh, both of those at home. So I think our schedule's pretty tough overall. All right, some prop bets that I really like. This I'm excited to get into. So I've got about 20 different prop bets listed here. I'm going to give you 3 of them that I really like and 2 honorable mentions. First one, Kamari Lassiter to win Defensive Rookie of the Year, plus 5,000. Throw a buck on it to win $50. Throw 10 on it to win 500. So what's interesting here is I'm looking at Steven Nelson's stats last year with 5 interceptions, being the guy who's being targeted on the other side of Derek Stingley. If Steven Nelson's production was given to Kamari Lassiter last year, Kamari Lassiter finishes as a top 3 candidate for Defensive Rookie of the Year. No questions about it. This year, who are the guys that you're looking at? You're looking at Jared Verse. You're looking at Leatu Latu. You're looking at Byron Murphy. All of them pass rushers / interior defensive linemen. Generally, that's where this award goes unless you have a standout corner like a Sauce Gardner. If Kamari Lassiter can somehow get 5 interceptions like Steven Nelson, you're telling me he can't finish top 3 in D-Roy and potentially top 1 if these pass rushers don't pan out? I think it's a bit of a mistake. I really do. I think he has a great chance to win D-Roy. I think another guy at the corner position who I wouldn't mind betting on would be somebody like Terrion Arnold or Cooper DeJean. But give me Kamari Lassiter because the odds are just so much better. And he's their number 2. It's sold. It's over. He is their number 2 for sure. Okay. Number 2. Tank Dell over 4.5 receiving yards at minus 115. The guy had 7 receiving touchdowns last year in 11 games. I know Stephon Diggs comes in. I know Joe Mixon comes in. I don't care. This is a guy in Tank Dell who they trust so much to get the ball in open space. He's one of the top route runners at his age, maybe even in the NFL in general. I wouldn't be shocked if it came out this year that it's like, is Tank Dell a top 5 route runner? The guy is incredible for his size and his speed. He's just such a compact ball of speed. It's incredible. But can he get 5 touchdowns? Absolutely. If you've got 7 or 11 games, give me 5 this year. Are you kidding me? Now, it is receiving touchdowns, so no rushing touchdowns. So if you get, some sort of reverse, that's not going to quite count. But I like him in over 4.5 for sure. Okay, and the final one. Nico Collins over 1,050.5 receiving yards. He is their number 1. End of story. He could run every bit of the route tree. He runs through tackles. His yards after catch are phenomenal. He is so tough to bring down. And he had almost 130 targets last year. Even if that goes to like 115 and he catches 85, 90 balls, with his run after catch, with his yards per attempt, that's going to net him at least 1075, if not going up towards 1,200 yards. So those are my 3 favorites. Kamari Lassiter, put a buck on it. Do it. Nico Collins over receiving yards, lock it in. Tank Dell over receiving touchdowns, lock it in. A sneaky one, which I couldn't find on the Hard Rock. I don't even know if you can bet this. But JJ Watt to win Comeback Player of the Year. It would be really cool if he decided to come and play for the Texans late in the year, made some plays late, but I don't know. That would be more of just like a niche little bet for me. 3 things I'm most excited for. First is the passing game, obviously. This is the most weapons I've ever had as a Texans fan. Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Dalton Schultz, Joe Mixon out of the backfield, John Mechie hopefully healthy, Xavier Hutchinson looked good in the preseason, but that's your 5th, 6th option as a receiver of receiving threats. Brevin Jordan from the U, who looked awesome yesterday. Or on Saturday, excuse me. But the passing game, I would imagine that CJ Stroud's confidence, his competency, and his overall leadership, as well as output, is going to increase this year. I know about the sophomore slump. I think the Texans have done a good enough job with the infrastructure around him to help avoid the sophomore slump. And also, CJ seems like such a dude, man. Like you just feel it. It's not even like a statistical thing. Like you watch him, you could feel the level of competency from him. Second thing I'm most excited for is the pass rush. So we get to Nico Autry back in week 7. We could be looking at 3 players with 8+ sacks. Danico Autry, Daniil Hunter, and Will Anderson. And we might be looking at 2 players with 10+ sacks in Will Anderson and Daniil Hunter. They could finish with 12+ sacks. It could happen. Now, Will Anderson, he's dealing with a little bit of an ankle injury. Should be good for week 1. He's put on some weight in the offseason. He looked really light coming off the edge last year, especially early in the year. But he's still going to be super fast, going to be efficient in the run game. And it's going to be impossible to double both Daniil Hunter and Will Anderson. Unless you go like 12 personnel, and you just keep the tight end in and on both sides and just try to chip them. It's going to be really tough to do that. And with Danico Autry coming back, you've got another pass rush with 10+ sack potential. I don't know how you stop this pass rush. Now, the interior of the defensive line is going to be a little bit of a problem. We'll cover that in a couple minutes. But third thing I'm most excited for, 6 primetime games this year. Most by far for the team since 2012. It's been very rare that I've gotten to see this team in the brightest lights. They never give them Monday night games. They never give them Sunday night games. They'll get an occasional Thursday night game, but it's always like Texans, Titans, Texans, Jaguars on Thursday night. Nobody wants to watch it. Everybody's going to sleep, catching up on the Z's for Friday. But this year we get 6 of them. Let's freaking go. Get to watch my team on the brightest lights. 3 things I'm most skeptical about. Let's come back to this. The interior defensive line. Folarusu, Fatukasi, and Mario Edwards Jr. are our 2 best defensive tackles. That's not what I want to be saying at this point of the season going into week 1. So I am worried about pressure getting up the middle on CJ. That was one of their, I'm sorry, not on CJ, on opposing quarterbacks. That was one of their biggest troubles last year, was when teams went to, empty personnel to where they went maybe 1 tight end in to help chip on Will Anderson / Jonathan Grenard. We could not get a lot of pressure up the middle. It was mostly when teams would run play action that we would do our best work with Sheldon Rankins and Malik Collins. I am worried about them also being able to stop gap running schemes. Worried about them stopping things like trap or inside zone. I think that's going to be a bit of a problem up the middle. So we'll see. But it's definitely the weak part of their team. Tim Settle's another guy that they have on defensive tackle. But, he's been a kind of a journeyman a little bit. The second thing I'm most skeptical about, offensive line / running game. So Tunsil and Shaq Mason should be the most reliable offensive linemen Tunsil's a stud left tackle. Put on teach tape for him if you want to teach a left tackle how to pass protect. Shaq Mason is also a great pass protector from a right guard position. Really underrated in his pass pro. Great hands, great feet, great anchor. But if those guys are healthy, they'll be reliable. It's the pairing of Kendrick Green and Kenyon Green at left guard. It's Juice Scruggs at center that I worry about. And then Titus Howard has not been able to stay healthy. Take a shot every time Titus Howard is out for games in the NFL. You'll just be wasted. And we're paying him big money, paying him like $16 million a year. You just hope that he can stay healthy at right tackle. He's unfortunately had to play right guard a lot in his career, which he's not strong enough against interior off the lineman to play right guard consistently. He's a right tackle. I think pass protection right tackle he'll be exceptional at, as in a top 10 pass protector at right tackle. So you hope he can stay healthy, but I worry about the offensive line. It was so banged up last year. It really hurt our running game. It led to Devin Singletary having his worst yards per attempt of his career. And coming from Buffalo, that's saying something. Buffalo does not run the ball. But Slowick wants to run the ball here, our offensive coordinator. He wants to run the ball. So can we parlay this into like a top half running game with Joe Mixon? That's kind of the plan, right? Can we get to the top half? Can we get to anywhere from 13th to 16th in running game? If we can, we get that paired with the passing attack that is going to be electric. That's what I'm looking forward to. Okay, but I'm skeptical about it nonetheless. And the third thing is our schedule after our bye week. It is fucking brutal. So you get the Titans and the Jaguars, and then you hit your bye. You come out of the bye with the Dolphins at home, the Chiefs on the road, the Ravens at home, and then you finish with the Titans. But by the time you get to the Titans, you've played 3 games and count it 10 days. December 15th against the Dolphins. December 25th against the Ravens, and the Chiefs are in the middle. So 10 games, 3 of the top teams in the AFC. If we can go 1-3 in that stretch, I'd be happy. With that being that the Titans is our win also, and we go 2-2 in our final 4 games. That might be like best case scenario. Now I know you'd say, oh, well, you can go 3-1. I don't know, man. I don't know. That's really tough. Really tough against those teams anyway, let alone in a 10-day stretch. I just hope we can stay healthy. By comparison to a team like the Colts, here's the Colts' final 4 games. At Denver versus Tennessee. At the Giants versus the Jaguars. Count it 4 teams that missed the playoffs last year. Yeah, yawning at that one. God damn, the Colts are plus 325 to win the South. That might be the best bet I've gone over so far. I might put some money on the Colts to win the South. With that final schedule, if they're in it late, if they're 1 game out, you're telling me that the Texans go 2-2 and the Colts can't go 4-0? That scares me. All right, so let's wrap it up. My record and my expectations. Texans finished 10-7 last year. I think they repeat and they go 10-7 again this year. I do think 10-7 will be good enough to win the division. I am worried about the Colts. I am, but I'm going to be optimistic here. I think it's going to be good enough to win the division, likely the 4 seed yet again. And I think we're going to repeat and that we're going to lose in the divisional round again to like the Ravens, the Chiefs, the Bills. Although I wouldn't be surprised. I would not be surprised if we play, in Buffalo and could win that game in the divisional round. But that's kind of my expectation. I think we kind of repeat. Could we get to the AFC Championship game? Maybe. I know a lot of people are picking it, but it's my gut feeling. It's kind of where I lean. I'm going a little bit chalk from last year. I just think with the harder schedule, even though the team got better, you play better teams as well. They're going to go 10-7. That's my guess. And Bobby Slowick earns himself a head coaching job going into 2025 with whatever team it may be. Last thing. I think CJ Stroud takes a huge leap this year. So I'm thinking 4,500 plus yards total, 33 plus total touchdowns, and top 3 in MVP voting, potentially finishing as your MVP, depending on how the Texans do. But he's got to stay healthy. He was out for two games last year due to concussion protocol. He's just got to stay healthy. So that's your Texans preview going into 2024. If you guys couldn't tell, I am an even-keeled person. I look at the good and the bad. I'm more, one of my favorite sayings is pray for the best, prepare for the worst. But one of my buddies told me recently, he said that you've got to revel in this moment because there's nothing that I can control about the Texans play going into 2024. So I've got to enjoy this time, this hype here, because I may never get this kind of hype again. You don't know. So I am enjoying the hype. Although my expectations may be a little lower than that, I'm enjoying the hype. I'm in it to win it. I'm here for the Texans. I'm banging the table for them. Let's go, Texans. Get the bullpen rocking. I'm going to go see Texans Bills this year. I'm going to see Texans Jag this year. I might go to another game in between. We'll see. But I could be more excited for my team, boys. So that's it. That's your Houston Texans preview. Let me know if there's another team you'd like to see me do a little bit of a preview of, something that you'd like to hear just a little bit of analysis on. If there's a team, I did a little bit of Lions talk last week because I think they're my favorite to go to the Super Bowl out of the NFC. I have that bet locked in. But yeah, I'll do another pod this week going over my predictions for the playoffs, kind of an overall season preview, maybe a couple props that I think are my favorite, just in general, a couple betting props, and we'll go from there. So with that said, guys, enjoy your Labor Day. Take care, and let's go Texans. See you guys later.